This is Listening to Understand, where sensitive Jewish truth seekers gather in a safe place for candid conversations on challenging topics. When we listen to truly understand and not in order to respond, we can replace judgment with curiosity and open our hearts to every Jew, regardless of their personal choices. As Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. I'm Atana. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me here. I have a special guest from Israel, Moriel Bareli. And why is he special to me is because his mother is somebody near and dear to me. She saved me from the pits of hell when I was going through my recovery almost 14 years ago. And I found her on the yoga mat every single night at 8 o'clock. It was my Kodesh Kodashim to go to yoga. And I talk about Davira, your mom, a lot. And then she moved to Israel. But Davira was the one that taught me to be in the pain. She used to say to me, Matana, you're running all around to look for fixes. Sometimes the fixes are just sitting in it and let it passing through. And I remember where I was standing and I started crying to her because I said, Davira, what do you think about this healer? And what do you think about that? And she said, Matana, stop. Just stop. Be in it. And I said, why would I want to be in it? Why would I want to sit in my misery? She's like, because the only way out is through. And I use it so often in conversations with people. There's challenges in life and there's challenges in the world. We're going to talk with Moriel about the Israel-Palestinian challenge. Sometimes we have to sit in it in order to understand it. And I think that's what Moriel did. Maybe he got the wisdom from his mother. So first of all, thank you for being here and thank you for what you do. And we're going to see how your mother's DNA came into a very young man passionately moving to Israel. So give us a little bit of a background, Moriel. At what age did you move to Israel and how did you get to where you are now?
First of all, thanks for having me. And I moved to Israel at the age of 18 after high school. My parents are Israeli, so I had the language from the house and also the kind of Zionistic education. My father would always say, Israel is the homeland. We all need to move back there. And it was difficult for my parents because, they had a family and a job and a house and everything. But the kids received that education. And my older sister, when she finished high school, she made Aliyah, went to the army. Then 2 years later, I finished and I made Aliyah. And then we brought our parents back to Israel as well, Baruch Hashem. And it's been a very interesting journey. I mean, a lot of people, say, like, how did you go from New York to living in the Shomron? And before I was in the Shomron, I was in Drom Har Hebron, southern Hebron. I studied there in Mechina, in a pre-army program. And then I moved 2 years after that. I moved into the old city of Jerusalem, where I was studying in yeshiva for 2 years, but it was like in the Christian quarters, which is on the boundaries of the Muslim quarters, and our dorms were on the other side of the Muslim quarters. So every day we would walk through there, and people will say, like, how did you go from New York to this, right? So I guess it's in my neshama, and it's been a very interesting journey so far.
So how old are you today?
Now I'm 29. Been living in Israel for 11 years.
And you're a father?
Yeah, I have 2 kids. Two little girls, Baruch Hashem.
So I remember your mother telling me when you moved to Israel that you're learning Arabic. And I'm like, okay, that's strange. Like, why would a kid moving to Israel from Long Island choose the passion of learning Arabic? What was your trajectory back then, and why did you decide to learn Arabic?
Yeah, so I guess first of all, I have it in my blood a little bit. My father's mother, my grandmother from my father's side, was born in Yafo in 1925, and she basically spoke Arabic as her, second language, but she knew it fluently. And my dad knew a little bit of Arabic, so I would hear that here and there in the house. And my mom was into belly dancing and she would listen to Arabic music. So I guess maybe a little bit of that influenced me. Ever since I made Aliyah, like I said before, I was the first 4 years here in Israel. I was basically surrounded by Arabs in very close quarters, especially in the old city in Yerushalayim. Every day, there were interactions with them, and especially if you remember 2016, I think it was the knife intifada, they called it. There were like many stabbing attacks and hit and runs and things like that. And I was learning at the time in Yerushalayim, and we would walk every day through Sha'ar Shechem or Sha'ar HaPrachim, and literally, a few minutes after we would pass by there, we would hear that there was an attack and things like that. So I started to really understand how important it is to know Arabic. You have to be connected to the environment around you, the people around you. You have to understand, especially with the situation, security-wise that we're in. I knew that it was, very important that you have to have at least a grasp of what's going on. You can't just be detached from reality. And also, I just found it very interesting to connect, understand the culture, the religion, connect to what's going on around me. I think that's kind of like my personality. I like to dive deep into things and connect. And I found that connection through Arabic was very interesting for me. And it went even deeper and more interesting in a way that I didn't even expect, because once I had a basic grasp of Arabic, I started to speak with Arabs, or mostly Muslims, basically from all over Israel and all over the Middle East, using different apps and stuff like that, like language learning apps. So at first, it was really just to improve my Arabic. And I would speak with people from Gaza, from, Yerushalayim, Arab Israelis, people from Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, you name it. And those conversations took a very interesting spin, and that's how the book that I wrote was born.
Is there a different, like in English, there's like South African, English, Australian, American, and even if in America, are you from Chicago? Are you from LA? Are you from New York? Can you tell that, like the dialects or the different nuances?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there are different dialects. They go into like really, if you really go into the nuances, there are, different dialects between each village and each town. Even in like Yerushalayim, you have the ones who live in the old city and the ones who live on Har HaZitim, and they have different slangs. So like, you can differentiate that way. But yeah, there's, the Syrian dialect, the Lebanese dialect, Jordanian, Bedouin. There are a lot of different dialects. I focused mostly on the dialect. It's called the Palestinian dialect, but I like to call it the language spoken here in the land of Israel. But there's so many different dialects within that dialect. But the general dialect is also understood by almost everyone else in the Arab world. So because it's so similar to Lebanese, Syrian Arabic, Jordanian Arabic, so like most people around the Arab world will understand this specific dialect. And today I actually teach Arabic. I've been teaching for a few years, and I have like a digital course. It's Hebrew to Arabic, so it's really for Hebrew speakers. But I think it's important for everyone here in Israel. I really don't know why it's not like a mandatory sub. Yeah, it needs to be 100%. And
in order to have the conversations that we should be able to communicate and understand each other's desires, needs, frustrations.
Yeah, for sure. And they teach it in schools, but it's mostly the modern standard Arabic, the ones that the type of Arabic that they use in the news and in newspapers and things like that, but it's not the spoken dialect. So, for example, even my brother, he learned Arabic in school, and he got a score of 100 on his exams and whatever, but he can't have a conversation. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, right.
Wow.
So, yeah,
that's interesting. So when they were filming Fauda, what do they have to learn in order to film Fauda?
That's the spoken dialect.
So I was always wondering, like, if somebody took you to work in the Secret Service, would you have to work on your Arabic to a degree that no one would know that you're not you're born an Arab?
Yeah, of course. If it's like that kind of level of a job, you have to know every detail of the language.
Nuance, slang.
Yeah, everything. Someone told me one time that like in a certain village, they, let's say, smoke certain cigarettes, and if you smoke a different cigarette, they know that you're not from there. They could literally smell you. Like it's very, very nuanced.
It's very similar to somebody that would come into Williamsburg and they would say, okay, let's say you're Litvish and you walk into Williamsburg, you're like, you don't belong here. Or even a certain Hasidut and Williams that they don't have in Williamsburg, and you're like, you don't belong here, or you don't belong in Borough Park, or you don't, like, you belong or you don't belong. The other day I was walking in Woodmere and I saw a person, and I'm like, wow, I could see how they feel the lack of belonging. Like they
Right.
so don't feel like they fit.
Right. So in the Arab world, it's even more so because they're so tribal, their culture even today, and those distinctions are even more prominent in the Arab world.
So when you start a conversation with an Arab, do they know right away you're an Israeli? You're a Jew?
No. Well, it's funny. First of all, it depends if I'm speaking to them in Arabic and I tell them that I'm American, they don't believe me because first of all, like classic Americans who have a heavy American accent, they don't know Hebrew, for example. They don't speak Hebrew fluently. It's very, very difficult for them to speak Arabic and to pronounce, the proper pronunciation. So when I speak in Arabic and I have the good het and ayn and whatever, so they don't believe me that I'm American because Americans don't speak that way.
Don't have that.
Right. I actually recently, it was funny, I spoke to through this app, you could also do like video chats. So I spoke to someone from Qatar, and I obviously didn't tell him right away that I was Israeli. I told him that I'm American, and he was looking at me and he goes, "You don't sound American, and you don't look American. You look kind of like you're from our area."
Right.
So then I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I'm Jewish and I'm Israeli." And then he was like taken back, and I was like, so what do you think about Israel? And he like curses Israel, whatever, F Israel. And I was like, so you support Hamas? Like your country is literally funding Hamas. What do you think about them? And he goes, of course, I support Hamas. And the way he answered me was so, like, it was so nonchalant. It was so simple. Like, he wasn't trying to rub it in my face or something. He was literally just saying like, of course I support Hamas. Like, what other option is there? And I kind of realized how deep the problem is. They don't even see the problem with supporting Hamas. They see Israel as the terrorist and Hamas as the freedom fighters. It was an interesting conversation, but the truth is that, especially in my book, I don't talk about like the more, superficial, I call it, the political side of the conflict, because there's a much, much deeper, a deeply rooted issue behind this so-called Palestinian, Israeli-Palestinian conflict that most people don't know about and almost nobody talks about. And these are the things that came up during these conversations that I've had.
So you started having conversations with people, and then you're like, wait, maybe we should write a book on these conversations and like gather them and see if there's a common denominator, if there's a machane meshutaf, if there's something that we can pick up on the same repetitive conversations and hear it from different people, from different Arab Muslims from around the world, some in Israel, some Egypt, some Qatar, and maybe even in America, and see if there's something that comes up that you can learn from it. You did it as a learning experience, right?
Exactly. I mean, the book was kind of born after I've had, like hundreds of conversations with people. And while this was going on, and like you said, I started seeing this pattern. Doesn't matter from which country they were from, doesn't matter if they were, more religious or less religious, or even secular, which is not exactly, that's a whole different thing, but how like secular Muslims, it's not the same as the way that we perceive secular Jews, for example. It's very different, but it doesn't matter, on where they are on the spectrum of being religious or from what country they're from. They would tell, I saw this pattern and I started taking screenshots of all the conversations and writing it down and all these things. And then I realized like, wow, this needs to be put together in a book. The word needs to get out there. People need to understand this because, I saw that almost no one was talking about this subject, but it's so important to understand.
First of all, what's the name of your book?
In English, it's called When a Jew and a Muslim Talk. In Hebrew, it's a little bit different. It's Beni u Benak, which is in Arabic, right? Beni u Bencha. and sichoti Muslimin, like conversations with Muslims, but in English when a Jew and a Muslim talk.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what did you see so important that people need to know about that you said, wait, these conversations are not being heard, but the world needs to, is it the world that needs to hear them? Is it the Jews that need to hear them? Why did you feel that it's so important to share the conversations and the common denominator that was coming up?
So first of all, I think that in general, everybody needs to learn about this. But more precisely, it starts from us. I think the Jewish people really need to understand this. And I think we'll touch on that at the end because it'll be more clear why. But if we start from the beginning, I'll give you an example of a conversation that I had. I would speak to someone, and then eventually I would tell them that I'm Jewish, right? Or Israeli. Mm-hmm. And then they would say, okay, wait a second. Are you Jewish? Are you Israeli? Or are you a Zionist? So, okay, what's the difference, right? And then, they would say the Zionism is this, is that, but we have no problem with the Jews. We only have a problem with the Zionists. I said, okay, but I'm a Zionist. We're all Zionists. What do you mean you don't have a problem with the Jews, but you have a problem with the Zionists? And then I started to understand that, they see it in a totally different perspective than we do, and their perception of Zionism is totally warped. But that's more because of all the incitement and propaganda. But there's something deeper than that. I would tell them, okay, what do you mean you have a problem with Zionism? You understand that Zionism is just the dream, the 2,000-year-old dream that the entire Jewish people have to come back to their homeland, to the land of Israel. And then they would tell me, what do you mean come back to your homeland? This isn't your homeland. The Jews never had any kind of sovereignty in this land. They've never ruled over this land. They have no connection to this land. They're not connected to Jerusalem. They're not connected to the land. For example, there's this one guy I was speaking to from Gaza back in 2016, the knife intifada. He got upset at me. I don't remember exactly what happened, but he got upset at the Israelis. He said, you Israelis, Zionists, whatever, you're stealing our land and killing our women and children. And I told him, hold on, 1 second. Let me ask you a question. What do you mean we're stealing your land? The Muslims took this land from the Christians who were there before them, from the Byzantine Empire. Before that, it was the Romans. Before that, they took it from the Greeks and from the Persians until they took it from the Jews. So he says, wow, study history. The Jews have never had any sovereignty in this land before 1948.
Oh, they really teach them that?
Yeah, this is what they're learning today, but it goes even deeper than that. So I would say, how could he say such a thing? He's never heard of, David HaMelech, King David and King Solomon and the Bet HaMikdash and 1,000 years of Jewish sovereignty in this land. And then when I started going deeper and I started reading the Quran and the different scriptures and commentaries on the Quran, so you see that there's this perspective it's not a perspective, it's really the basic understanding in Islam is that, I have to do a little bit of history here, but Bnei Israel that are mentioned in the Quran were actually considered Muslim.
Let's just give a definition to the Quran for people that don't know.
Okay, so the Quran is the, Bible of Islam. It's their holy book that their Prophet Muhammad received over a period of time, and later afterwards it was written down and became the Quran.
It's the Quran, right? They say Quran, right?
No.
Quran. Okay, Quran. And is it different books like we have, or is it one book, one big book?
It's one book. It's one book. It's not organized chronologically. It's organized according to like the longest chapters to the shortest chapters.
And is it like a history book?
There is some history. For example, the entire story of Bnei Israel, the exodus from Mitzrayim, from Egypt, and receiving the Torah on Har Sinai, and all these things. It's all written there. This is one of the things that came up. I was reading this in the Quran, and then, it's not like the next chapter is, okay, what happens after Yetziat Mitzrayim, like we have in the Torah. So I wanted to know if it's written in the Quran that Bnei Israel were brought into the land of Israel. land of Canaan back then. So I asked this one guy from Saudi Arabia. He was like a religious guy that I would talk to. And so he was well versed in the Quran. And I asked him, I read in the Quran about, the exodus from Egypt. Does it also talk about how God brought the people of Israel into the land of Israel? So he starts laughing and he says, look, are you talking about the Jews today or Bnei Israel from back then? Because the Jews today do not represent Bnei Israel. Right? So this is one of those things that I was like, blown away. Like, what does that even mean?
What does that mean? What does he mean? Did you ask him? What does that mean?
Right, so, of course. Yeah, so when I started researching this and asking people, what I understood was, according to the Quran, Bnei Israel were considered Muslims. Okay, I'll explain that in a second, because obviously it doesn't make sense. And so was Moshe, so was Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, even Adam HaRishon was Muslim. So what does that mean to be Muslim? So this is why it's important also to understand Arabic. So the word Muslim in Arabic means someone who is submits himself to God, right? Totally submits himself to God, listens whatever God says he does. And of course, the only way to be a good Muslim is also to listen to the prophets, because how could you know how to submit yourself to God, without listening to the prophets of God? So that's what it means to be a Muslim. So if that's the definition, I think we can all agree that we can call Bnei Israel and Moshe and Avraham Muslims in that sense, right? So where does the problem start, and how are the Jews today not connected to Bnei Israel that are talked about in Torah and in the Quran? So what happened is that Bnei Israel started to sin. They started to move away from this religion, Islam, and they started to move away from God. They, sinned in the Chet HaEgel, Chet HaMeraglim. They worshipped the idols. They started killing the prophets that were sent to them.
So Islam is not a specific religion. It's the action of being in relationship in religion, in any. Connected to God.
Yeah, but it's also the only religion.
Okay.
All the other religions like Judaism and Christianity and whatever are all man-made, this according to Islam, are all man-made religions which were kind of like offshoots, offspins of the original Islam.
So they believe that Adam HaRishon was Muslim until Kabbalat Torah, and in Kabbalat Torah the Jews manufactured a new religion called Judaism?
At Kabbalat Torah, they received the Torah from Moshe, who was Muslim, and they were Muslim. They believed in one God. They listened to the prophets.
In the Quran it says that?
Yeah, well, look, let's say, it doesn't say that Bnei Israel themselves were, but it says that the children of Yaakov, who was Israel, for example, when Yaakov was on his deathbed, he called all of his children to come in, and he told them, when I die, you need to worship the God of my forefathers, and you need to be Muslimin. And they say, yes, we are Muslimin, meaning we are submitting ourselves to this one true God, right? And it says about Avraham, it says, I'll even say it in Arabic, it says, Ma kan Ibrahim, lo haya Avraham, Avraham was not Yehudiyan, wala Nasriyan, he wasn't a Jewish or Christian, ولكن كان حنيفا مسلما, but he was like a true Muslim, right? He was a true Muslim. So what does that mean? He was a true Muslim. Obviously, Muhammad didn't exist, but it's not about believing in Muhammad. It's about believing in one God and his prophets. So the Bnei Israel who were Muslim and received the Torah started moving away from this, belief in God. They started sinning. They started moving away. They betrayed God. They left him. And therefore, he left them. And there are many verses in the Quran that the Jews, because of this, they are punished and they're cursed and all of these things. And basically, they detached themselves from Bnei Israel, from the original religion. And from being Bnei Israel, they kind of created their own religion and moved away from what they were before. And because of this, they are cursed and they were sent into the galut, and that's where they're supposed to stay under the control.
Where do they believe the split happened? Where, at what point? Chet HaEgel?
No, the pinnacle is basically at the time of Ezra Sofer, right before the galut, right after the destruction of the second Bet Mikdash and going into the galut for 2,000 years. So it was like a process. They were moving away from this original religion called Islam. So Muhammad comes around in the year 610, and he claims that he receives these prophecies from the angel, whatever, and he starts saying all these stories that are related to the Tanakh, right? He's talking about Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. It's all written, but there are some changes. For example, he talks about Akedat Ishmael and not Akedat Yitzchak. He talks about that Bnei Israel were in Mitzrayim, and Moshe came to Paro and his servant Haman and told him, "Let my people go." So he accidentally brought Haman, who is only like I think a thousand years later. He brought him into the story by mistake. So all these things, and the Jewish people, of course, didn't accept him as a prophet.
Where was he from?
From Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and there were Jewish tribes in the area, and they didn't accept him. And even the Arab tribes who were pagan at the time, even Muhammad's father and grandfather were pagans who were like priests of idolatry. But Muhammad tried spreading this religion, and no one was really listening to him. It took him, I think, like 10 years to gain, some followers on Instagram or whatever stuff. But it took him a while until it started catching on. And the problem is that people kept telling him, and this is documented in the Quran itself, that people were laughing at him and saying, "You're telling us stories." It's called Asatir al-Awwalin. You're telling us stories of the first people, which is Bnei Israel. You're telling us stories that we already heard about from the Tanakh. Also, Christianity was already has been spreading around the world for 300 years at that time. So people kind of already knew these stories, and they're saying, like, why are you copying and pasting and then telling us that you're a prophet? You're taking stories that already exist in the Tanakh. So people were making fun of him because of this. And then he came up with a brilliant explanation, and he said, "I'm not taking stories from someone else's book or religion. I'm a continuation of this original religion, which is called Islam. I'm not creating anything new. I'm the continuation, the last prophet of all these other prophets since Adam HaRishon, since Avraham, since Moshe, since even Jesus is considered a Muslim prophet, right? So I, Muhammad, am just a continuation, and I'm bringing back the original truth that the Jews perverted in their text that they received when they were Muslims, but they changed it. They moved away. They started sinning. And then God tried plan B through Jesus, and it didn't work out either. So now he sent me as his last and final prophet to bring back the original word of God. But the problem with that is that it's all built on the fact that the Jews are in the wrong, that the Jews are the ones who sinned and moved away and changed the text. And that's why there are differences in, between the Quran and the Tanakh.
So now it makes sense when you listen to all of the people in the world. Now what you're saying, it makes sense because this is what they learned in the text, that really we stole the land, and it was always by. Now I understand, because you hear them speak and you're like, what are they making up history? Are they rewriting history? But you're saying no, they were taught history like this, and they really honestly believe it.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, I spoke to this one girl from Yerushalayim, and I said, "Hey, where are you from?" And she goes, "I'm from Jerusalem, the capital of Palestine." I said, "What do you mean the capital of Palestine?" It was never a capital of any Islamic power that governed in this land. Not during the Ottoman Empire, not before that when the Muslims conquered this land, not even from 1948 to 1967 when the Jordanians captured Yerushalayim and Yehuda v'Shomron. It was never a capital. And she says, What do you mean? It's been the eternal capital of Palestine ever since the Knaanim and the Yevusim. And what does that have to do with you exactly? What's your connection to the Knaanim? She said, what do you mean? We're the descendants of the Knaanim, which is total BS because most of the Arabs living here came here in the past 150 years. Some of them, their family names are Masri, which is Egypt, and all these other places in the world. But even so, she tells me, look, Jerusalem belongs to the Muslims because Abraham, who was a Muslim, he built the base for the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And he was a Muslim. So Jerusalem belongs to us and not to the Jews. So it's like a crazy twisted narrative of history, but this is what they learn. This is what it says in their religion. This is what they believe in. And I understand why a lot of people don't want to talk about this because first of all, it makes the problem, seem much bigger. If you talk about it on like the political level, it's a huge problem. No one's been able to solve it for the past 75 years, but it's not a 75-year-old problem. It's a 1400-year-old problem. So it kind of makes the problem bigger.
And like, in a way, I have compassion because I'm thinking like, let's bring it down to our level. Like, let's go to Israel and we have the differences between the right and the left in Israel. Should you serve in the army? Should you not serve in the army? Who are you going to go speak to? You're going to speak to your rabbi or the Zionist of Israel, the Haredim that don't believe in Zionism, and you speak to the people that believe in Zionism. So who are their leaders? No one's listening to each other's leaders.
Right.
Kal vachomer, even more so, Islam and Jews we're not going to go and say to people in Islam, oh, you know what, your Quran was right. And they're not coming to the Torah and saying, oh, you were right. So the conflict is not solvable.
Well, yeah, so that's what it seems like at first. What I think is that the truth is that first of all, this is, you asked in the beginning, why is it so important? Why did I write the book? What message really is there? So first of all, we have to understand this deeply rooted issue because we can't keep living in La La Land and thinking that the issue is X when the issue is Y, because you can't solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is. That's first of all. Yeah. Exactly.
Know the problem. And now the conversation is completely different.
So exactly. So if the entire conversation is, do we need two states or one state? Is there apartheid? Is there occupation? Is there this? Is there that? How do we solve this political issue? And we're talking about politics. So you're trying to find a solution to a problem that doesn't actually exist. That's not really the problem. It's like, according to those who call themselves Palestinians, the entire land is Palestine. It's not just,
Where is Palestine in their map? Where is Gvulot Palestine from the Bible?
It's the same map of Israel, just without the Golan, because it, like, according to them, belongs to Syria, right? They don't recognize that we captured it back in 1967, and that one belongs to us. But so basically, it's the same map of Israel, right? Just look up online map of Palestine. It's the same exact map. So I see all these videos on YouTube sometimes, like explaining the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and then they show you Israel, which is the map of Israel, but without the West Bank, the Yehuda v'Shomron, and then they show you Palestine, which is the outline of the West Bank and Gaza. But in what reality is that Israel or Palestine? Because those who believe in Palestine believe that the entire land is Palestine. So you understand, people are living in this fake reality that they're creating for themselves. No one's listening to the other side to understand what they actually think. So it's the same problem. If we're talking about, okay, let's create a two-state solution, this will solve all of our problems. Nobody here is even talking about a two-state solution. Not the Arabs and not the Jews. Like,
anybody, right. They're the people that are not living in Israel are trying to create a solution for the people that are really fighting for the solution.
Right, and they're trying to create a solution for a problem that doesn't exist.
For the narrative that they put to the problem that doesn't exist.
Exactly. But instead of understanding the actual, narrative, the actual problem that exists, So if you're talking about it on a political level, you're missing the whole point. If you're not talking about it on the religious and educational level, you're missing the whole point. And the solution, if you understand that the problem is a religious educational problem, the solution is a religious educational solution. Right?
I saw this interview. Now, it's embarrassing. I'm not good with culture. I'm sorry, but I'm not good with culture. You'll have to forgive me for that. So I saw this short reel that took me to a podcast, and it was with Idan Reicher. I didn't know. I never heard of him before. I'm sorry. I didn't. And I sent it to all my Israeli friends. They're like, "Ma, that means Idan Reicher." But it was a short clip of 30 seconds, and then I went and I dug up the episode where he's talking. And he was trying to say, you know what the problem is in Israel? And he looks at the person that he's interviewing and all the staff that was there recording. There were like 4 or 5 other people there. He said, I'm going to ask you one question and you tell me first. And I'll tell you what the problem is, what happened after October 7th. He said, I'm giving you 3 seconds to answer. What are your first, Yehudi or Israeli? So the interview lady said, Yehudiya. No, עכשיו, Yehudiya. All the other ones said, right away, Israeli. So he said, כאן הבעיה. This is the problem. He said, you're taking a nation of faith, which is Hamas. They're coming from a place of religion to Israelis that there's no passion of the faith of the history. They're coming because this is Emet and it's history, and we're not going to rewrite history. We're going to die for the truth. To the Israelis, that is a little bit political sometimes. And he said maybe this is a problem, that they're coming with their in the name of Islam, and we're coming in the name of Israelis versus Jews. Is that interesting? What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I actually have a different take on it, because there's every word, every musag that you use, it can be understood this way or that way. So I actually want to switch it around. I always tell this story. After I was here for, I think it was 2 years, I went back for Pesach to New York, and we had, like every year, we had our extended family over, and they're like very American. And I asked them, I said, are you Jewish or Israeli? And they said, we're Jewish. What do you mean? We don't even have Israeli passports. I said, no. You don't understand what I'm asking you. Are you Jewish or are you Israeli? And they said, we don't have Israeli passports. We're not Israeli citizens. I said, no, you don't understand. Before we're Jews, we're Am Israel. Even before we received the Torah, we became a nation. In Yetziat Mitzrayim, we became Am Israel.
Okay, but Am Israel is not Israeli.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
So you were saying we're first a nation, and then we're Yehudim.
Yeah, right.
Vaz, we're citizens. That's what you're saying. We're first a nation.
Exactly.
Becoming Yehudi was the more refined part, the more merukaz, maybe.
I think we lost, throughout the Galut, we lost the nationalistic part of our religion, which is the main part. It comes before the religious part, meaning first we're a nation, okay? Then we have a way of life, which is the Torah, that we're supposed to follow as a nation, because the Torah is a guidance for us as a nation to know how to live our life as a nation, to bring bracha to all of the other nations in the world. In no part of that sentence did I mention individualism. Of course, there is individualism within Judaism, but what happened is that Judaism in the Galut, because we weren't together as a nation, we didn't have a land, we didn't have an army, we didn't have a government, we didn't have any national thing that would bring us together as a nation other than our religion, the practical Dalet Amot Halacha. So Judaism turned into this individualized religion where if you keep the halachot, then you're Jewish, right? If you stay within the dalet amot shel halacha, then you're keeping Judaism. Wait, but what about the other half of Judaism? The nationalistic side. How are you keeping that? So for 2,000 years in the Galut, there was no nationalistic side of Judaism. But in 1948, when the State of Israel was founded, and today, where more than half of the Jews are living in Israel, we came back to the nationalistic side of Judaism, which is living as a nation in Eretz Israel. We're still missing some parts, which is, of course, Bet HaMikdash, which is the merkaz that brings us all together. And half of the mitzvot are dealing with the Bet HaMikdash that we can't even do any of them. We started reviving the nationalistic side of Judaism, which is the fact that that's what Am Yisrael is. That doesn't mean that we don't have to keep the mitzvot, that we don't have to live the way that Am Yisrael is supposed to live. But first and foremost, we have to understand that Judaism is coming back to be what it originally was as a nation, not an individualized religion. So that's what I'm talking about when I say that first we're Yisraelim as part of Am Yisrael, and then we're Jewish, because Jewish is how do you say musag?
A term?
A term. Yeah, thank you. So being Jewish or Judaism is a term that came about after the split of Mamlechet Yehuda and Mamlechet Israel, and then what was left was Yehuda, who were the Yehudim. And that's where the word came from. And then throughout the Galut, we were known as Yehudim, and it became individualized. But now we're coming back to be Israel, right? So the fact that you have a citizenship or not doesn't matter.
But I think Israeli and Am Yisrael is two different things. I think that Am Yisrael is closer to being a Yehudi versus Israeli.
Right, so it depends how you view the term.
I think you're trying to explain the idea of what is Am Yisrael. But it's not the same terminology of what somebody says an Israeli.
Right.
Because it could be an Israeli that's not Jewish at all, and I don't think he's part of Am Yisrael, right?
Right. And in every idea, Rav Kook talks about this, but in every idea there's emet, and then there's a lot of sheker misaviv. So I think that there's like a very valid point in even secular Jews who are saying Ani Israeli, even if I don't keep anything about Judaism, Ani Israeli. And there's a truth in that they're coming back to this original idea.
Israeli or Yehudi?
So, no, I'm saying them calling themselves Israeli, and they don't care about being Yehudi, meaning they don't care about the religious side, but they care about the national side. So that point is something that let's call it the religious Jews who are missing the nationalistic side of Judaism need to learn more of. And those secular Jews who don't care about their religion and their religious history need to learn more about that. So each side has their pros and cons, right? So I think there's a nekuda shel emet in that, but it has to be developed more in the right direction.
Taking a break for a few seconds to give you a quick announcement. If you haven't joined our Listening to Understand WhatsApp community, please do so now. There's a link in the show notes. We're going to be sharing more exciting stuff only for the members of the Listening to Understand WhatsApp community. See you there. So in your book, you're bringing these conversations that no one from the Islamic people that you spoke to believe that Israel belongs to the Jews. They all believe the same thing, that we stole the land from them, and we're murdering their children in order to keep our land that's theirs. And we basically came and took the land.
Right.
Kibush haaretz.
Right. So, going back to what we were talking about before, they believe this because they believe that the Jews are not Bnei Israel. So, those people who believe that they are Jewish and not Israelim in the במובן הזה של being part of the nation, meaning you can keep being Jewish without being part of the nation, right? So that's exactly what the Muslims are saying, that you guys created this religion, you're not even a nation, you have this individualized religion that you created, and you're not part of Bnei Israel that are written about in the Tanakh. So that's one problem.
So Moriel, in a way, we're like, your book is just highlighting that maybe there is no solution.
Why?
And we're in such a big problem.
I didn't want
right?
you to...
Because we're not going to rewrite history.
I don't think we have to rewrite history. We're writing the next chapter of history, which is what we need to...
And how? How? What is your belief? Like, what are you going to do?
Right. So I think that, first of all, we need to educate ourselves as Am Yisrael. We need to deepen and strengthen our emunah and our understanding of our connection to Eretz Israel and Am Yisrael.
Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael be'Am Yisrael.
Bidyuk.
Am Yisrael be'Eretz Israel. Like, just like they believe, exactly what Idan Reicher were saying. Like, do we believe that it's ours because we're Am Yisrael? Or just, like, it's our, we just capture this place and it's ours as Israelim. We just have Zachut.
Right.
Are we coming as a nation?
Right. So one of the, like, biggest, like, smacks in the face that I got during one of these conversations was someone told me, he said, why should we, as Palestinians, Muslims, whatever, believe that this land is yours, that belongs to you, if half of your people don't even believe that? So I was like totally taken back. I was like, but then I understood, as I was saying before, I think half of the problem is that Judaism has become, and it's not our fault, but this just happened over 2,000 years of Galut, but Judaism has become this individualized religion and lost its nationalistic side. And we have to re-understand who we are as Jews, who we are as Am Yisrael. The only way to be, it says in the Tanakh, Hatzivi lach tzionim, I forgot which Navi says it, but Rashi says, Hatzivi lach tzionim, he brings from the Gemara, that the mitzvot in Chutz La'aretz are like tzionei derech, so that we can remember how to keep the mitzvot when we come back to Eretz Israel. But the mitzvot in the Galut, their purpose isn't meant to be kept in the Galut, they're meant to be kept in Eretz Israel. And the only reason why we have to keep the mitzvot in the Galut is so we remember how to do them when we come back to Eretz Israel.
Wow.
This is what it says in the Gemara. This isn't me saying.
Wow. What does that mean, that there's no mitzvot? That the mitzvot are now as only practice for the real thing. So there is no kiyum mitzvot amiti until Beit Mikdash Shlishi?
No, in Eretz Israel.
So Eretz Israel gam lifnei Beit HaMikdash.
Yeah.
אבל השאלה if the question is the Eretz Israel, the kibbutz Eretz Israel that we did 75 years ago, is that the Eretz Israel that they were talking about in Tanakh, or is it when lo bagalut, when there's Beit Mikdash, when there's like Yerushalayim Abnuya?
It says Eretz Israel. Why everybody tries to go like this and make it their way? It says Eretz Israel.
No, because there's no Beit Mikdash.
But it doesn't say Beit Mikdash. It says Eretz Israel. I'll give you another example. Kol hadar bechutz la'aretz domeh lemi she'en lo Eloah. Anyone who lives outside of Israel is like someone who doesn't have a God. What do you mean? How can you say such a thing? It's not me saying, again, it's written in the Chazal. But how can that be possible? About the Orthodox Jews who are keeping all of the mitzvot that they can in Chutz La'aretz. That's like they don't have a God? Yeah, it's like you don't have Elohei Israel. You have this God of your own individualized Judaism. That's not the Elohei Israel. The point of anyone who lives outside of Eretz Israel, when they could live in Eretz Israel, they're detaching themselves from Am Israel, from the whole point of Judaism, which is to be kept as a nation in Eretz Israel. So if you're doing it outside of Eretz Israel, even for example, because it's easier for you, and I'm sure I'm going to get some of your viewers upset about this conversation.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It is easier. It is easier. And whoever's going to say no, it is easier. Period. End of story.
Also, if it's easier religiously, it's easier to keep all the mitzvot in Far Rockaway, right?
Than Israel? I don't know.
Let's say. What's that? What's the yeshiva there?
Shar Yashuv?
Yeah, Shar Yashuv. Okay, you're living in the Shar Yashuv bubble, and I have friends there still. Right? It's much easier to be a religious Jew Right.
Then in Israel?
Let's
then
say,
in Israel?
for example, if you lived in Tel Aviv, it would be much harder, right? So you want to stay in your bubble. Or your kids are going to have to go to the army. You're scared they're going to be secular after that. Whatever, for whatever reason, people think it's easier to keep all of the mitzvot that they can keep in far Rockaway. But it literally says, Kol hadar b'chutz la'aretz ki'ilu en lo Eloha. So the mitzvot that you're keeping, you're not supposed to be keeping them for yourself so you can stay religious, so your kids can stay religious. That's not the point. The point of this entire religion, which is called Judaism, is meant to be a national thing that Am Yisrael keeps in Eretz Israel, and the pinnacle of that is when there's a Bet HaMikdash and in Bet HaMikdash, so that we can bring bracha to the entire world. So we kind of forgot about our mission, our goal, our purpose for 2,000 years, and now we're coming back to that. So I think that when the Muslims are telling us, you Jews aren't part of Bnei Israel, you know what? I think again, there's a nekudah shel emet in what they're saying. That's one side of the problem. The other side of the problem is those people who say, let's give back Yehuda v'Shomron to the Arabs. Let's give back Har HaBayit. Don't let Jews go up to Har HaBayit and pray in Har HaBayit. Let's give back all these places. So you're strengthening the Muslim argument that we are not Bnei Israel. Because if we were Bnei Israel, we would be much more connected to Yehuda v'Shomron, to the heart of the Torah, of the land, where almost all of the stories took place, where all of the holy sites are. That you're giving that back? Okay, I guess you're not part of Bnei Israel. It's funny because the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, writes that the Plishtim, their entire purpose in the Tanakh, whenever they fight against Am Yisrael in the Tanakh, there's always like a berur that's done afterwards. There's like a deeper understanding of who we are as Am Yisrael. So he says the entire purpose of the Plishtim is to help us understand who we are. And I think that it's funny, and it makes sense that the Arabs here in Israel decided to call themselves Palestinians, which is actually Al Shem HaPlishtim, and they're taking up the same purpose that the Plishtim took, which is to help us understand who we are. So I think that's really what this is all about. It's not exactly a solution, but I think that the problem will go away when we start understanding who we're supposed to be. Because this entire problem is pushing us in that direction, pushing us to understand who we are, pushing us to understand our true connection to Eretz Israel. So if we understand that, then Hashem won't need to keep, making this problem happen, because the problem exists just so that we are moved in the right direction. And that's like kind of spiritual, but I think that also practically speaking, when we show the Muslim world, yes, we are Bnei Israel. This land, we have a deep, deep, deep connection to this land, historically and religiously, and we have a purpose why we need to be specifically here and not anywhere else in the world. And it's for your benefit as well, for the benefit of the Arabs here and for the entire Muslim world and for the entire world. I always joke around with, I had a few friends from East Jerusalem, Arab Muslims from East Jerusalem that I studied with in a tour guide course. And I would always talk to them on the bus rides and all these things. So I would always joke around with them and say, look, you guys like to pray, right? You like to daven. You do it 5 times a day. We do it 3 times a day. When you pray, you bow. It's more than bowing. So do we, especially on Har HaBayit. It's a mitzvah, right? You like eating lamb. So do we. We do korbanot with lamb, ala esh. Let's go. Let's do it together, right? So of course it's like a joke, and they would laugh with me. But then I would tell them, like, seriously, it says that beti bet tefillah tikareh lekol ha'amim. That's the goal of Bet HaMikdash HaShlishi. It's supposed to be a place of tefillah for all of the nations.
I like that.
So let's do it together. Like, really, what's the problem?
But you really believe that it's possible together?
Of course, I think it's possible. I don't think it's possible tomorrow, unless Bet HaMikdash falls down from the sky, which I don't believe in either. But
I think Ki Beiti Beit Tefillah Yikareh Lekol Ha'amim is באחרית הימים, when
Right.
Am Israel, I think this is what we believe, when Am Israel is the leader of Amim Meshaltim et Am Israel, right?
Right, but how do you get there? How do you get there is the big question.
And you think it's possible to get there in these days before Emet, before Mashiach, before there's the great reveal? I don't know. I'm wondering, like, how do you think this is going to happen?
So I don't obviously, otherwise I would be a Navi, but I don't obviously know how it's going to happen exactly. But
You started off this episode saying we're not even speaking about a solution to the problem.
Right.
So there's not going to be a solution because we're not even addressing the problem. What is the problem? And you're saying, okay, now I'm going to tell you what the problem is because I went to the I went and I asked and I heard. So this is what the problem is. So you as a yoetz, what would you say is a solution?
So I think the solution is that when Am Yisrael lives the truth that we're supposed to live, we truly believe in our connection to this land, and we understand our purpose here. I think that the Muslim world will understand that as well.
We need to look at them and say, look at their passion. We have to live with just as much as passion. We have to learn from them.
Yeah, I agree.
They're living with passion, with their truth, with passion. Do we also have to live with passion? And they're saying you're not living the truth.
Right? They're telling us you're not who you're saying you are. You're not who you're supposed to be. So if they're telling us that we're not who we're supposed to be, that means they want us to be who we're supposed to be. Otherwise, why would they care?
That doesn't mean that. I don't know if that means that.
It does, in a very deep way. Their entire religion is based around our stories of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov.
Right.
They just took it their own way. It's the same thing with Christianity.
They took over. They're saying you left it on the side of the road. You neglected. We're taking over.
Right.
And that's it. We're going to do it the right way.
So imagine they understand that we didn't neglect it. We didn't leave it on the side of the road. Hashem never left his people. He never will leave his people.
I think you're asking for a dream because that's not ever going to happen.
I think it will. And I think that if
you're very optimistic. I don't even know how, like, wow. First of all, it's reassuring that you say that. I thought you were going to say to me, okay, I'm coming to tell you, like, after I'm listening to this, I'm like, oh, he's coming to tell me that there's no solution. Right. So just live with no solution and just accept radical acceptance. It's misery. It's never going to change. This is the fact. So don't even try to talk about a solution because there is no. So just do acceptance. Try to live with as much peace and menuchat nefesh and safety because this is going to be for the end of days.
Right. Enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride and just be safe and try to think about how much worse it can get because it's going to get bad. So plan ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that might be true too, but I am optimistic because imagine that the world starts investing as much energy and time and money in finding the solution to this problem and not the other problems that they fabricated. Imagine that we all understand the real problem. We understand it's a religious and educational problem, and we start changing education, starting with Am Yisrael, because it doesn't matter if you change the entire world. If we don't believe in ourselves, then we have no hope. If we don't understand who we are and what we're supposed to be and what our true connection to Eretz Israel is, then it doesn't matter, you know, what other steps you take. So that's the first step that needs to be taken. And from there, it'll radiate outwards. And there are practical, steps that can be taken. We signed peace treaties with, I think it was 4 or 6 Muslim countries on the Abraham Accords, Morocco and the United Emirates and Sudan. And, there was another place that I forgot. I think a part of those peace treaties on the governmental level, if the government understands that this is the real problem and this is the real solution, there needs to be educational plans that are put in place that are part of this peace treaty. The only way we're making peace with you is if you start changing your education about the perspective towards Jews, right? And we'll help you. We'll send you rabbis and people. There are rabbis today. Rav Sherki, I don't know if you've heard of him. He he's been all over the Muslim world lately. Not all over because it's very small, but he's been to certain places. There are certain Muslim people who understand that he has a message to tell them, and they want to hear this message, and they understand that.
Really?
Yeah. This is what it's still very, very small. It's a very, very small minority, but it's starting to happen. Even if you look at the Christian world, if we go back 500 years, let's go back to the Crusades, and I'll tell you that in 1,000 years or 900 years, we're going
to be doing business together, and not only that, they're going to be loving us.
Yeah,
and
there's hundreds of millions of evangelical Christians that love Israel. You're going to tell me you're crazy. Let's go back just to the Holocaust, okay?
Right.
Chas v'shalom, you and I are standing in the gas chambers, and I tell you, listen, in 3 years, okay, let's say we're in 1945, the day before the war ends, and we don't know that it's going to end the next day. I tell you, in 3 years, there's going to be a state of Israel where Jews are going to come from all over the world. We're going to protect ourselves from all of the 400 million Arabs around us, and it's going to be tough, but it's going to be amazing. You're going to tell me you're breathing in too much gas and you're crazy. So today we're sitting here and we're talking about how the Muslim world is going to connect with Am Yisrael, and there are going to be hundreds of millions of Muslims who love us and appreciate us and want to connect with us. So maybe in a few years we'll be reminiscing.
הלוואי, and I think it's חזון אחרית הימים וגר זאב עם כבש. And I really believe that with their passion and our desire to understand without what you say, Am Yisrael. Let's go back to Am Yisrael. And I think that it really starts within us. I was talking to my sister about it yesterday, and the Rabbi Brown spoke in Shul last week about what's Milchemet Mitzvah and when you're supposed to go to Milchama, Chiyuv. And everybody has their feelings, right, about who's supposed to go to the army. Should you go to the army? And I say, first of all, who am I to have these conversations even? I live in America. Maybe my chiyuv of milchemet mitzvah is just as much as, just because I live in America doesn't mean that I'm patur mi milchemet mitzvah shel Yehudim. Just FYI for all of, and I'm in them, with them. Why am I any different than any Haredi that says that they don't have to go to the army? I don't know.
It's a very
and
good point.
I think that we need to shine a flashlight on us and say, hello, Americans, you're pro-Israel. Where are you sending your kids to the army? Just because you don't live there doesn't mean you're not Am Yisrael. Exactly what you're saying, right? Oh yeah, this is exactly what you're saying.
Right.
Are we Am Yisrael, B'kol Yisrael, B'shvil Israel, B'shvil Eretz Israel? And I think, I said to my sister, I think part of our problem is we're so busy with, are we Am Yisrael? Or are we so mefurad that it's easy? Like what Haman said. Like let's separate them and it will be easier for us. And we're separating a little bit. Can we unite as Am Yisrael? Can we just come together for a second? So we saw right after October 7th for a week or two, and the world was fooled. The world was fooled because they're like, oh, everybody's united. No. We weren't united. It was your enemy and my enemy are an enemy, but suddenly we become each other's enemy, and we don't know who we're fighting against more. But can we unite as Am Yisrael, like you say? As Am Yisrael, are we coming together? And maybe we do need to learn from the Muslims how to be Am Yisrael.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, I think, the number one thing is achdut. We need to come together. We need to understand who we are and what we are. And I think that that's exactly what the Muslim world is pushing us to understand.
To wake up and have the difficult to look. What you're doing in this book is saying, okay, fine. Here's the mirror. Let's look inside. The Muslims are saying to us, they're calling our bluff. I think that's what you're saying, right? The Muslim are calling our bluff and saying, wait a second. Really? Is this who you are? Are you this?
Exactly.
And it gets us to look inside and say, wait, where did we fall off tracks and where can we do better?
Exactly. And I think that if everybody understands that and everybody looks at the entire situation in that light, then we'll move forward in the right direction and we'll move forward much more quickly than we think. because again, we're always mitaskim with the wrong things, the wrong problems. They're not the real problems. We have to focus on the real issues and find the right path and the right solutions for the real issues. And that's exactly what this is all about.
And how are we going to do that? Like practical. So now everybody's listening to this episode and they're like, okay, very nice. Now what? I'm going to go back to my regular social media, be very upset at October 7th. What happened? Feel the victim. Not fair. They're killing us. They're taking over. What could we do in a day-to-day practical way, each as an individual, to become an Am? What do you think? What do you do? I'm asking you as somebody that took this on as a project. What do you do in order to, as you say, in 10, 15 years, you're going to look back and we're going to look at this episode and say, remember, Matana, you said to me, how? And it became, so what are the tiny little changes in our day-to-day life that will make big changes in the future?
Right. So for me, it's a little bit different because I think that what I'm doing with the book and with getting the word out and trying to help with this educational mission, I think that's part of my goal. And living here in Eretz Israel and in the Shomron, it's like, there's no way around it. You're part of Am Yisrael in the deepest way. For people in the listening in the audience who are living in the United States, I don't know. I mean, I think make Aliyah is really a big part of this. But I think people just need to, if people really look inside of themselves and think about this and really internalize this, they'll find their own path. Some people it's education. Some people it's supporting financially. Some people will decide to make Aliyah. Some people, whatever it is, everybody has to, look inside themselves and find the right path.
And the goal is, you think that the goal should be Yehudi B'Eretz Israel.
Of course.
That this idea, the Yehudi lo B'Am Yisrael is a cop-out.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Eretz Israel niknet b'yisurim. Like, באמת, Eretz Israel niknet b'yisurim. And it's a sacrifice. It really is a sacrifice for the longevity of Am Yisrael.
Yep. I remember after I made Aliyah, so the first year, everybody after high school, everybody comes to study in yeshiva and
right.
What's it called? The girls go to seminary. And the principal of our school, he was the rabbi and principal, he came to visit and did like a dinner with whoever could come. It was very nice. But afterwards, I went up to him, and he's also Israeli. And he said, Kol hakavod, she'asita aliyah, right? And I said, listen, I'll tell you the truth. It's 100% education from my parents, from my dad mostly. Not 0% from the school that I went to. Right? And I said it to his face. And
it's true. It's true.
He said, look, if I start talking about making aliyah and whatever, they're gonna close they're gonna shut down the funding and whatever. So I said, so shut the school down. What's the purpose? So you're saying you're
feeding the lie. You're feeding the narrative that is feeding the lie. Yeah. And you're seeing hypocrisy. You're seeing big hypocrisy. And are we living the ultimate truth? Are we living the ultimate truth? And are we willing to look at what we're doing wrong and say, you know what? It's not okay.
Exactly.
כל הכבוד, מוריאל, כל הכבוד. ואתה עושה את זה בכזה עדינות נפש, with such humility, simplicity, without, you don't have to come with muscles and אגרופים and like boxing gloves on. You're like, let's have these simple conversations that, איך אומרים, מים or מים שקטים חודרים עמוק, or something like that. Like, right. You could still do it, but it goes slowly. And, but I think it really it forces us to have intellectual honesty. Yeah. And it's always easier to look at the other group that's not doing right in order to not look at ourselves. It's so much easier to say, oh, they're doing wrong, but how much are we doing right?
Exactly. And I think it's the same thing with the Muslims. So instead of looking at them and saying, "Oh, they believe this and they hate us and
בדיוק מה
they
שאני
this,"
אומרת, exactly what I'm
right,
saying. It's so much easier to point a finger at them and say they're killing us, it's Hamas, they support Hamas. Wait, okay, fine. Two wrongs don't make a right. What are we doing right, and how can we do better and more right? And let them do their wrong. I mean, it's not fine, but I'm saying let's focus on us versus on them.
exactly.
Wow, beautiful. What an avodat kodesh, Moriel. Mamash avodat kodesh. Avodat kodesh. It's so beautiful. So this book is it published already?
It's not yet published. It's the Hebrew version is coming out in a few weeks, Bezrat Hashem, and then the English one is going to be another few months. I actually wrote the book in Hebrew, so but I actually here I have it just to show
Oh, very
people.
nice. Okay,
So,
very nice.
Yeah,
I love the visual of it. It's powerful, and basically it's all the conversations that you had. It's a book of conversations.
No, it's not all the conversations because that would be encyclopedia.
A Tanakh.
Yeah. It actually, I like cut it down. It was much longer. It's also not just like a book of conversations. It's kind of like the story, the journey of how it happened and how I started
Education
speaking.
with conversation, with an understanding, with a goal.
Right.
Beautiful.
It's actually a really good read. It's like a book that you like sit down and read from start to finish. All the information is inside the stories and the conversations. And
so, Moriel, how are you going to get this into schools and education? How are we going to do this? How are we going to get it to every home?
Alavai. But that's part of my goal. I really, especially here in Israel, I've been thinking about how to do that. I don't think it's going to be so simple to like go from the top down, meaning through like, the Ministry of Education. I don't think that they would really, it's like too much for them to handle.
Do you think they don't believe what you're saying? You think that you're going to have a lot of pushback on this?
I'll definitely have pushback. I don't know if they don't
from
believe.
Who? From the left?
From the left, from the Muslims, I'm sure if I go with this to the Department of Education, they're going to say it's controversial, it's too this, it's too that. I don't know. Maybe I'll be surprised and they will accept it. But I think it has to come from the bottom up. I think it needs to, I'm planning on going around to all the schools and principals and showing them, the book. I also want to write like a kind of like pamphlet that comes with it that has like a kind of like a curriculum. Like how can you read the book and each chapter have the kids do their research and learn more about this and more about that. Because there's so much to learn about. And I think that if I like organize it, that people can, each chapter, they have the certain sources and certain things that they need to learn and whatever. I think it could be a really good program for schools who would accept that. And then we'll work our way up. I mean, I'll start from both ends, from the top down and from the bottom up. And
hopefully they'll meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Be'ezrat Hashem. Yeah, that would be nice. So do you have good friends that are Muslim?
I did in the past. Unfortunately, when I drafted to the army, I had to like delete all the phone numbers and connections that I had. So I lost some of those connections. There are some people from like the tour guide course that I studied with. We had a better connection during the course. And then of course the war broke out and, things are a little different. But today I have less of those relationships that I did in the past because I was like so obsessed with it. Any chance I had, I would just speak to as many people as possible on these apps and whatever. And I built some really good relationships. Especially today, it's much more difficult though to do that after the war. Like things have gotten so much worse.
You weren't able to go to any of the relationships that you had and say, let's sit down and talk?
What, now after the war?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I kind of lost touch with them before, but
are you curious to know what they would say?
I still speak to people like on, people that I didn't have a relationship with before, but just, I always want to know, let's say, what do they think now about the war? What do they think about this and that? So I just open the app, find some people to talk to, and I don't know.
Is it possible to be friends?
Yeah, it's possible to be friends, but it's kind of weird when you're friends with someone who totally their entire view of you and your history and your nation is just totally different than what you understand and what you think that how they should view you, right? So you can be friendly, but at the end of the day, that there's this like underlying perspective that's at the end of the day is kind of negative.
But isn't that with everyone? Like you would say Republicans and Democrats, vegetarians and carnivores. Like you can say that about anybody, right?
Right.
You could say it about the Haredi and the Chiloni. You could say it about, like, is it that if we fundamentally disagree on a way of living, we can't be friends?
No, I think that it's important to have friends who have different opinions. Just, I don't know, right now in the point of my life, I'm not looking specifically for friends in the Muslim world. But I mean, I'm friendly with everyone that I meet, but I'm not like specifically trying to build relationships. I'm kind of more focused on really understanding their perspective. Sometimes if you have good friends and good relationships, then you can dive deeper into that. But not, I don't necessarily need to have good friends in order to kind of learn what I want to learn.
But maybe it's not so much learning their perspective as learning our truth really well.
Right. So yeah, I think that's kind of the point that I reached is the past years I was really focused on building these relationships and understanding them and talking to them and researching and like, okay, I got it. I understand. I got the message that I needed to get. And now I think I need to focus on our truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's where I'm at.
Right. ושבו בנים לגבולם, really. That
Right.
I think that's what it's all about. Like we return to a home in the real way. Thank you. Thank you very much. Give me a few sentences in Arabic.
Well, like practically to use with people in the street?
Yeah.
First of all, of course, Salamu alaikum. Shalom aleichem. Right? And then you answer, if someone says it to you, you say, Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam. Wa aleichem shalom.
Wow, fascinating. Moriel, thank you for this educational, eye-opening. Now I have to do cheshbon nefesh. Wow. It's hard. These conversations are hard because you have to really go to the uncomfortable places and say, are you living truth? Are you reflecting truth?
Yeah, 100%.
Are you teaching your children truth? By your actions, by our actions, right?
Yep.
It's really powerful. Thank you for your service and thank you for doing this for Am Yisrael. Bemet, Avodat Kodesh. Thank you very much for showing up here. And I can't wait to be a few years down the line to say, wow, he was right. There is yesh tikva be'ezrat Hashem, ושבו בנים לגבולם in the right way. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Matana.
Thank you for listening to Understand. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please hit that follow button on your favorite podcast app. This way you don't miss an episode and you help us grow. You are part of our growth. We appreciate your support and we hope you choose to listen to us on our next episode. We'd love to hear from our audience. If there's anything you would like us to research, to talk about, please contact us on our website, listeningtounderstand.com. And if there's any insight that you got from this and you want to share with others and you are happy for us to read it out loud on our show, send us your insights, send us your thoughts. We want to listen to understand. Bye till next time.